The Rebbe starts off the Sikha by saying that the first place within Eretz Yisrael that went over practically to Avraham Avinu, and actually in front of the eyes of the other nations as well. So the first place that goes over to Avraham Avinu and automatically therefore the ownership of all the Yidden as well is Chevron. When Avraham Avinu buys the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, since we know in Torah everything is precise, it's obvious that the fact that this is the first portion of Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael is Chevron. Clearly it must be connected with something unique about Chevron. And based on this, the Rebbe is also going to explain a fascinating medrash, an interesting medrash, that says that the reason why Kiryas Chevron is called Kiryas Arba, one of the reasons, is because it had four owners. First it went to Shevet Yehuda, then to Kalev within Shevet Yehuda. Finally, it went to the Koyanim and then to the Levim. And the question is, what difference does it make? What relevance is this? What's the advantage that all these different people owned Chevron? But the truth of the matter is that this specifically expresses something unique about the Yidden's ownership over Chevron. So the Rebbe explains, one of the main advantages that we could speak about in Chevron is Chevron was one of the cities of refuge to where a person that killed B'shoigeg by mistake would run. Now we know that the Arei Mikla, these cities of refuge, belong to the Levium. In regards to the ownership of the Levium over these cities, we find something unique, a special advantage in the way the Levium owned their cities compared to the way the other Yidden owned their own cities and their own places. That is, in regards to the rest of the Yidden, in the time when Yovel, when there was the Yovel, there were certain limitations, there were certain laws of what happens if a person sells his field. There's a certain amount of time when he's allowed to buy it back, to redeem it back, after 2 years. There are certain laws regarding a house within a walled city. He could only buy it back within the first 12 months. By the Levium, there are none of these limitations at all. The Levi can take it back whenever he wants. Obviously with pain, but he can get it back wherever he wants. Which clearly shows on a much greater level of ownership that even as the buyer has it, or even if in a case where the Levi had given it away to the Beis HaMikdash, it always has a connection to the Levi. He could always get it back. So therefore we could say, this is what's unique about Chevron. It's an Ir Miklat. And therefore, it's an everlasting inheritance by the Yidden that own it by the Levium. However, says the Rebbe, if we look at it because of the advantage of Ir Miklat and a city of the Levium, perhaps there's a way to, maybe there's, on the other hand, there's a certain weakness in that. In a certain sense, the connection of the cities of the Levium to them seems to be perhaps less than the ownership of other cities to the rest of the Yidden. Because the Pasuk uses the expression that the Yidden should give cities to the Levium, Arim Lasheves, cities to live in, which sounds like it's only theirs to live in, but they don't have the full ownership over it. However, says the Rebbe, that's not the case. Although there is a machloikus regarding this, to what extent the Levium owned these cities, the Yerushalmi brings that there's a machloikus, whether Levium, in the vidui of Meiser Sheni, the confession that's said along with Meiser, where one has to say, thanking Hashem for the land that you have given to us, the Yerushalmi says that there's a machloikus whether Koyanim and Levium say this, and it's based on this machloikus to what extent the cities belong to the Levium. Is it really theirs, or it's just theirs to live in? But when we look at halacha, the Rambam actually paskins that the Levium do say this vidui. They do say to Hashem, the land that you have given to us, clearly of the opinion that it's not only their place to live in, but it's truly their inheritance, their piece of land. The Rebbe then also deals with a suggestion that perhaps according to the Rambam there may be a difference between the rest of the cities of the Levium that maybe belong more to them, as opposed to the 6 Arei Miklat maybe don't belong as much to them. But the Rebbe explains that in truth, we have to say that the Rambam would also agree that all of the cities of the Levium belong equally to the Levium in the fullest sense of the word. And therefore, to summarize again, the point being is that there's this very strong connection between the cities of the Levium and the Levium, and even more than other cities to other people, because again, the Levium could redeem their places, their houses and fields, more than any other Yid could do that. The Rebbe now adds another point. Not only is it that in addition to being an Ir Miklat, it was also given to the Levium, In other words, it's an Ir Miklat, and these Ari Miklat were given to the Levium, and therefore this makes it a special connection to the Levium. The Rebbe says, really, it goes the other way around. The fact that it's under the ownership of the Levium, that's actually what's creating it to be an Ir Miklat. The Rebbe explains. The Gemara tells us that when the Yidden were in the Midbar, then Machane Levia, the camp where the Levium were, that served as an Ir Miklat. And Rashi explains that Machane Levia served as an Ir Miklat, and then he says, Va'af Ari Miklat. And so too, in the future, the Ari Miklat, the cities of refuge, are going to be the cities of the Levium. In other words, it's implying that the main reason why an Ir Miklat functions as an Ir Miklat, saves the murder, the unintentional murder, is specifically because it was the cities of the Levium. As the Sefer HaChinuch in fact writes, that it's because of the Kedusha of the Levium, and how special the Levium were, that's why their land could be a kapara for this individual. However, the Rebbe says, based on this, we could ask, why does the Pasuk use the term that it's cities, Loshev, is just for them to live in, to dwell in, if it's fully theirs completely? So the Rebbe says that we could explain this in the following way. In regards to the way the Ari Miklat were given from the Yidden to the Levium, it was in a way, generally, most of the cities were in a way that the city generally was given from the whole Shevet to the whole Shevet Levi. In other words, Shevet Levi altogether, collectively owned the city. But it's not an individual ownership of a specific Levi over a particular house. And that's what the Pasuk means, Lashevis. You're only getting it to live in. In other words, yes, the whole Shevet has it, but individual houses and pieces of land don't belong to an individual Levi. Says Rebbe, based on all of this, we're now going to understand the uniqueness of Chevron. As we mentioned in the beginning, Chevron, the Medrash says, was owned by four. First of all, Shevet Yehuda, then it was Kalev, and then it went to the Kohanim and the Levim. In other words, when it left the general Shevet Yehuda, it now became Kalev's as an individual. And ultimately from there it went to the Levim. And that's really the point the Medrash is trying to tell us, that the same kind of ownership that Kalev had, when Chevron comes now to the Levim, it also comes in a similar way, that it's not just a general thing for the Shevet, but it's more of ownership in an individual way, in a specific way. And this is now the unique idea of Chevron specifically. Number one, because it's one of the cities of the Levium, it has that special eternal ownership, as we said before, more than a regular city has by the rest of the Yidden. But number two, even compared to the other cities of the Levium, Chevron has this unique quality, because here we have this idea that it's not just given generally to the Shevet, but the way the Shevet has it is also taking private ownership over it. The Rebbe now turns to Pnimi Yisrael Yanim, to the deeper idea of what's really in the Ir Miklat and in Chevron. The Rebbe says the inner reason why it's specifically the cities of the Levium that become the Ari Miklat and a Kapara is because generally the idea of a Chet is a concept of a separation between a Yid and Hashem. That's an Aveira ben Adam Lamokim. When you have an Aveira between one man and his fellow, it's a sin and it's a crime and it's a separation between one man and his fellow. When a person kills someone, there's this double sin and this double separation between man and Hashem and between man and his fellow. And therefore the kapara is in the cities of the Levium. Why is that? The word Levi itself is from the word of attachment, connection, the opposite of separation. So now, these Levium, what's their avodah? They were separated to serve Hashem and to teach the Yidden Torah. And therefore, what are they doing? They're causing the Yidden should once again become connected to Hashem. And this individual that did the Aveira to reattach to Hashem. That's number one. On the other hand, they're standing and working on behalf of the other Yidden in the Beis HaMikdash, which represents their Achdus Yisrael, their unity. And therefore, they also bring the tikkun to this idea of the separation between one man and his fellow. Now, this would be true for all the cities of the Levium. How much more so the city of Chevron, the city of the Avos and the Imais of all of Klal Yisrael. All of the tefillos go up through Chevron. And this is what's attaching us to Hashem, our tefillos, going up through Chevron. And therefore Chevron specifically is the kapara between man and Hashem. Also, Chevron is the place of the Avos and the Imais of all of the Yidden. In other words, this is the place where all the Yidden come together as one. And therefore this is also the connection of the kapara, the connection between one man and his fellow. Furthermore, the Rebbe says the very name of the city of Chevron is from the word of Chibur, and this is why this is the ultimate place which really brings both the Yidden and Hashem together and brings about the ultimate kapara.